The year was 1867, and the northern frontier was a graveyard of dreams. The land itself seemed tired of men, of their greed, their rifles, their endless hunger for gold and blood. Snow clung to the pines like the last breath of winter, and every gust of wind carried whispers of those who had vanished trying to tame this wild expanse. Out here, men didn't live long. They endured for as long as the land allowed it. They called him the monster of Birch Hollow. Some swore they'd seen him tear a man apart with his bare hands. Others claimed he was half bear, half man, something that crawled out of the war and never found its way back. But in truth, Jonas Hale was just a man who had run out of reasons to speak. He lived in a cabin built from rough-hewn logs, far enough from the nearest town that no one came looking unless they were desperate or foolish. His world was made of silence, the creak of wood in the cold, the steady drip of melted snow from the roof, and the low crackle of fire at night. When he did speak, the sound startled even him. That morning, the frost was so thick it silenced the forest. Jonas stepped outside bare-chested, steam rising from his skin as he split firewood. The axe came down with a rhythm, clean and merciless. He didn't look up until the sound reached him, faint, human, and out of place. A cry, weak. Jonas froze. It came again, from somewhere beyond the tree line. He set the axe down and listened, his breath clouding in the air. Another cry, followed by a thud. Something or someone had fallen. He moved toward the sound, boots crunching through the crusted snow. His hand hovered near the old Colt at his belt, though he doubted it was bandits this time. When he found her, she was half buried in snow, her small body trembling. A girl, barely alive. Her skin was pale from cold, her lips cracked, her black hair tangled and stiff with frost. She looked no older than 12. Jonas knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her throat. The pulse was faint but steady. She stirred and flinched when she saw him, her eyes wide, dark with fear. "Don't move," he said quietly. His voice came out rough, like the scrape of stone. She tried to push away, but her limbs were too weak. He hesitated, torn between leaving her to fate and dragging her into his world of ghosts. But something in the way her eyes refused to close, like she was fighting to stay alive, broke the stillness inside him. Jonas lifted her in his arms. She weighed nothing. As he carried her through the trees, he felt the faintest warmth of her breath against his chest, fragile and fleeting. Inside the cabin, he laid her near the fire, stripping the wet cloak from her shoulders and wrapping her in a fur blanket. Her small hands clutched at it, instinctive, as if afraid he'd take it away. He poured a little water into a tin cup, held it to her lips. She sipped, eyes half open, wary. "What's your name?" he asked. She said nothing, only watched him, silent and trembling. He tried again. "You got family nearby?" This time she whispered, voice thin as paper. "They're gone." The words hung between them, heavy and unanswerable. Jonas leaned back, staring into the fire. He didn't press her further. He knew what gone meant in these parts. Hours passed. The wind howled against the cabin walls, and the girl drifted in and out of sleep. Jonas dozed in his chair, rifle across his knees, haunted by memories that didn't belong to this quiet place. When dusk fell, the girl woke with a start. She looked toward the door, eyes wide with new fear. "They'll find me," she whispered. Jonas straightened. "Who?" Her gaze darted toward the window. "Men, with red coats. They killed my father." Jonas's expression hardened. "What do they want with you?" Her voice broke. "I saw their faces." He rose and walked to the window, peering through the cracks in the wood. The forest beyond was blackening with night. Somewhere out there, he could almost feel it, the weight of pursuit. He knew that feeling too well. "You're safe here," he said. The lie felt strange on his tongue. She didn't answer, only pulled the blanket tighter. Her eyes followed him as he checked the rifle and set another log on the fire. When night fully claimed the valley, the sound came, distant hooves, muffled voices. Jonas moved like a shadow. He opened the floorboards with practiced ease and gestured for the girl to crawl under. "Stay quiet." Don't come out no matter what you hear." She nodded once, clutching the blanket, and disappeared beneath the boards. Jonas lowered them back into place and stood by the door, breath slow, pulse steady. Moments later, 3 figures emerged from the dark, riders with lanterns, snow clinging to their coats. One dismounted and banged on the door. "Hale, you in there?" Jonas opened it slowly. The man outside grinned through a beard flecked with frost. "Heard you were keeping company these days." Jonas said nothing. His silence drew smirks from the others. "Girl came through here," the bearded man said. "Small, dark hair, scar on her hand. You seen her?" "No." The man stepped closer. "You sure? Word is, she's worth a lot alive." Jonas's jaw tightened. "Then you'll have to keep looking." The man's grin widened. "You forget who you're talking to? We ain't scared of campfire tales. Monster of Birch Hollow, just a broken soldier, hiding from ghosts." Jonas's hand stayed by his side, steady as stone. "You should leave." The man spat on the floorboards. "Don't tell me what to do, freak." That was the last word he spoke. The rifle but cracked across his jaw, sending him sprawling into the snow. The others reached for their weapons, but Jonas was faster. One punch, then another, each sound sharp in the cold night. The third man stumbled back, bleeding, scrambling onto his horse. "We'll be back, Hale. You hear me?" Jonas didn't answer. He watched them vanish between the trees, the echo of hooves fading into silence. When he finally shut the door, his breath came heavy and slow. He knelt, lifted the floorboard. The girl stared up at him, eyes wide, clutching a small wooden charm in her hand. "They're gone," he said. She hesitated. "You killed them?" He shook his head. "Not yet." She studied him for a moment longer, then whispered, "You're not what they say." Jonas looked away, his voice low. "You don't know what I am." She crawled out and stood beside the fire, small and defiant despite the fear in her eyes. "You could have let them take me, but you didn't." He turned toward the door, staring out at the dark. "You shouldn't have come here." She looked at him, her voice barely above a breath. "Neither should you." Outside, the wind rose, sweeping through the trees like a warning. The firelight flickered against his scarred face as he sat in silence, the girl's shadow falling across the floor beside him. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long, mournful, and strange. That night, the wilderness held its breath. The monster had found something he didn't know he'd been looking for. And for the first time in years, Jonas Hale was afraid, not of dying, but of what it might mean to live again. The snow began to melt in the hollow, and with it came the scent of wet pine and thawed earth. For weeks, the forest had been their world, a stretch of silence broken only by the crack of a rifle or the whisper of the wind between trees. Jonas Hale moved through it like a shadow, every step deliberate, his breath a steady rhythm in the cold air. Behind him, Meilin followed, clutching a worn coat too large for her, her eyes alert to every sound. He was teaching her to survive, though neither had said as much. How to light a fire even when the wood was damp. How to move without leaving tracks. How to tell if the crows circling above meant death was near. She listened without complaint, and when he spoke, she remembered every word. In the evenings, she helped him clean the rifles, her small fingers careful and precise. At first, the silence between them was a kind of wall, solid, unyielding. But over time, it softened into understanding. He didn't ask about her family again, and she didn't ask why he lived alone. Some truths were too heavy to carry in daylight. One night, as the fire burned low, she spoke without looking up. "You were a soldier." Jonas froze mid-motion. He had been sharpening his knife, but now the blade stopped just above the whetstone. The question was not really a question. "What makes you say that?" he asked. "You have a look," she said, "like someone who's seen too much and can't forget it." He said nothing. Sparks rose and vanished in the air. "My father was like that," she continued softly, "after the mines came. He stopped smiling. He said the land remembers everything we take from it." Jonas turned the knife in his hand, staring at the reflection of the firelight on steel. "Your father was a wise man." She hesitated, her voice almost breaking. "He's dead because of it." Jonas set the knife down. "Tell me." And so she did. Her family had lived near the base of Black Elk Ridge, where silver had been discovered a year before. The miners came with their claims and guns, backed by a company that bought the land from the government for pennies. Her father refused to leave, said the land was sacred, that his wife was buried there. They beat him first, then shot him when he tried to stop them from burning the house. Meilin ran. She didn't look back. Jonas listened in silence, his face carved from stone. When she finished, she stared into the fire, her hands trembling. "They wear red coats," she whispered, "like blood." The flames cracked, and for a moment the cabin seemed to shrink around them. Jonas stood, crossed to the corner, and poured himself a drink from a rusted tin flask. The liquor burned his throat, but not enough to drown the memories rising behind his eyes. He saw the faces again, the village, the smoke, the screams. The war had ended, but the killing had not. They called it a pacification, a word that made murder sound clean. He had followed orders that day. Too late, he had tried to stop what his men had begun. The fire spread faster than mercy ever could. When he spoke, his voice was low and hoarse. "I know what it's like to lose everything you can't replace." Meilin looked at him with something like pity. "Then why stay here? Why not start over somewhere else?" Jonas stared into the fire. "Because some places don't let you start over. They keep you one way or another." The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters. A storm was coming. Jonas could feel it, not just in the air, but in the weight pressing on his chest. He checked the rifle by the door, the traps he'd set along the ridge. Something in him knew peace never lasted long. By morning, the snow had turned to rain. Tracks appeared in the mud, horse prints, deep and fresh. Jonas crouched beside them, his brow furrowing. 6 riders, maybe 7. Moving slow, deliberate. He followed the trail to the ridge and saw the smoke rising from below. A camp. He slid down the slope, silent as a wolf. Between the pines, he saw them. Bounty hunters, the same kind that'd come before. But now there were more of them, and among them rode a man in a sheriff's coat, Elias Broom, the kind of lawman who didn't care who paid him, so long as they did. Jonas's gut turned cold. "They'll smoke her out," Broom was saying. "Kid's worth a fortune to the mine company. Witness-like that can ruin men." One of the riders laughed. "What about Hale?" Broom spat into the dirt. "If he's alive, he won't be for long. Burn the valley if you have to." Jonas slipped away before they saw him, heart pounding. Back at the cabin, Meilin was sorting dried herbs by the fire. When she saw his face, she froze. "They've found us," she said quietly. He nodded once. "We'll move by nightfall. Head north along the river." But she shook her head. "We can't keep running." Jonas stared at her, startled by the firmness in her voice. "You don't understand. These men—" "I understand," she cut in. "If we keep running, they'll find us again. And next time, we won't have anywhere left to go." He turned away, jaw tight. "I'm not letting them take you." "Then don't," she said, stepping closer. "Fight them. But not because you think you have to. Because you choose to." Her words hit harder than any bullet. For years, Jonas had been a man without choice, driven by guilt, by ghosts, by the weight of what he couldn't undo. But something in her eyes, that fierce defiance, reminded him of the men he'd once led, the kind who fought not for glory, but because the world had given them no other mercy. He crossed to the wall, where his old saber hung, wrapped in leather. Slowly he unbound it, the steel catching the faint light. Meilin watched, saying nothing. "You're right," he said. "No more running." That night, the rain turned to sleet. Jonas moved through the cabin like a man preparing for a war he'd already lost once. He set snares along the tree line, sharpened stakes, and packed the last of their food. Meilin helped in silence, her small hands steady even as fear glimmered in her eyes. When everything was ready, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden charm she always carried. "My father gave me this," she said, pressing it into his palm. "He said it keeps the heart brave." Jonas closed his hand around it. The wood was smooth, warm from her touch. "You keep it," he said. She shook her head. You need it more? He didn't argue. Instead, he slipped the charm into his coat pocket, where it rested over his heart like a promise. Outside, the night deepened, filled with the low hum of the coming storm. Jonas stood by the door, listening to the rhythm of the rain against the roof, the creak of the trees, the faint rustle of wind carrying the smell of smoke from down the valley. They'll be here by dawn, he said. Meilin stood beside him, her small hand gripping the edge of his coat. Then we make them remember why they were afraid of you. He almost smiled, almost. You shouldn't wish for monsters, little one. She met his gaze. Maybe we need one tonight. Jonas looked out into the dark, the faint light of torches flickering between the trees. The storm was nearly upon them. By dawn, the fire would come. But somewhere between guilt and rage, a man once damned remembered what it meant to protect. The storm broke before dawn, roaring through Birch Hollow like a living thing. Wind screamed between the trees, tearing snow from branches and flinging it across the valley. In the half-light, Jonas Hale stood outside his cabin, the world around him painted in shades of ash and steel. His breath came slow, steady, visible in the freezing air. Somewhere beyond the tree line, torches burned, a crooked line of fire moving closer with every heartbeat. Inside, Meilin packed the last of their supplies. Her hands shook as she tied the satchel, but her eyes remained calm, focused. She could feel the weight of what was coming. Jonas had told her to run when the shooting started, but she already knew she wouldn't. He stepped back inside, snow melting off his shoulders, his face pale under the flickering light. They're less than a mile off, he said quietly. 7 riders, maybe more. They've split to circle the ridge. Meilin glanced toward the rifle resting by the hearth. We can still leave through the ravine, she said. Jonas shook his head. They'll track us before sunrise. He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no distance in his eyes. If I don't stop them here, they'll burn everything behind us. No one else needs to die for this. She swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. You're not a monster, Jonas. He almost smiled, the expression faint pained. Maybe not, but I know how monsters think. He checked the rifle, loaded 2 cartridges, then handed her the small revolver he'd kept hidden in a drawer. You remember what I showed you? Meilin nodded. Good. Don't hesitate. He opened the door, the wind slamming against him, and stepped into the storm. The forest was a ghost's dream, shifting shapes and shadows, the storm muffling sound until every footstep seemed too loud. Jonas moved like a phantom, using the trees as cover, his body remembering the rhythm of war. The first man appeared near the edge of the clearing, lantern swinging from his saddle. Jonas waited until the horse's breath plumed in the cold, then fired. The man dropped before the echo faded. The others shouted, scattering, their torches cutting wild arcs of light. From the cabin, Meilin could see the flashes of gunfire through the trees. Each one felt like thunder rolling through her chest. She crouched low by the window, clutching the revolver with both hands. Rain had turned to sleet again, hissing against the roof. Somewhere in the distance, a man screamed. Jonas moved fast, reloading as he went. 2 more fell before they even saw him. But for every one that dropped, another seemed to appear from the dark. His shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed him, blood soaking through the coat. He didn't stop. Couldn't. The storm howled louder, drowning the gunfire until it felt as if the world itself was collapsing around him. Then through the chaos, he saw Broom, the sheriff, emerging from haze astride a black horse, rifle in hand, eyes burning with greed and hate. You should have stayed dead, Hale, he shouted. Jonas didn't answer. He stepped into the open, firing once, twice. The first shot missed. The second struck the horse's flank. The animal reared, throwing Broom into the mud. Jonas advanced, but a figure moved behind him, a glint of metal, a sound like a breath. He spun, fired again. Another man fell. Broom rose slowly, mud streaking his face, laughter raw in his throat. All this for a half-breed girl? You think that makes you righteous? Jonas's voice was cold. No, just alive. He lunged as Broom raised his rifle. The 2 men collided, crashing into the snow. The weapon went off, the bullet ripping into Jonas's shoulder. He grunted but didn't stop. They rolled, fists and fury, until Jonas's hand found the knife at his belt. Broom's laughter turned to a scream as steel met flesh. The sheriff fell back, clutching his throat, the life leaving him in ragged gasps. Jonas staggered to his feet, swaying, his vision blurred. The storm seemed to tilt, spinning around him. He looked toward the cabin, light flickering through the window, small and fragile against the darkness. He began to move, each step slower than the last. Behind him, the forest was littered with the dead. Smoke rising from torches dropped into the snow. The wind carried the faint crackle of fire. His traps had caught the last of them, flames spreading through the underbrush. Inside, Meilin pressed her ear to the door. She heard the storm, the distant fire, and then footsteps. She lifted the revolver, arms shaking, but when the door creaked open, she froze. Jonas stood there, bleeding, half his face streaked with soot and ash. He leaned against the frame, one hand pressed to his shoulder. "It's done," he said, voice rough. "You need to go." She ran to him, grabbing his coat, trying to hold him up. "I'm not leaving you." He smiled faintly, blood on his teeth. "You don't get to argue this time." "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "You can make it. The river's close." He shook his head. "Too many wounds. Too much fire. But you," he looked at her then, eyes clear for the first time since she'd met him. "You still have a chance." The fire outside was spreading fast, the heat pressing through the walls. Jonas reached for the lantern by the door, his hand trembling. "When I go out there, they'll come for me. That's when you run. You don't stop until you reach the water. Follow it north." She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "I can't." "Yes, you can," he said softly. "Your father would have wanted that." He pressed the wooden charm into her hand. "Keep it close. It'll remind you what bravery costs." Before she could answer, he opened the door and stepped back into the storm. She watched him go, the flames licking higher as his figure disappeared into the chaos. Outside, Jonas stumbled toward the burning ridge. The fire painted the snow orange, turning the valley into a vision of hell. Two of the bounty hunters still lived, crawling from the wreckage of their camp. Jonas raised the lantern and threw it toward the powder barrels they'd brought. The explosion tore through the hollow, shaking the ground. For a moment, the world became pure light, fire-consuming snow, smoke rising into the storm. When the silence returned, Meilin crawled from the cellar where she had hidden. The cabin was gone, the valley scorched and blackened. She called his name once, twice, but only the wind answered. By morning, the storm had passed. The world lay quiet beneath a thin veil of ash. Meilin found the charm half-burned in the mud near the river's edge. She knelt, clutching it to her chest. Then, using a shard of wood, she carved a small marker in the earth, J.H., the man who stood between. As she walked north, the first light of day broke over the trees. Behind her, smoke drifted upward like a prayer. Maybe, she thought, monsters weren't born, they were made. And sometimes, if the world was kind enough, they became something more. Far off in the distance, the wind carried a sound, soft, almost human. A whisper, or perhaps just memory. It said her name.